Welcome to the Underground, the Steel City Underground, the black and gold standard for Pittsburgh Steelers coverage. Now, here are your hosts, Joe Kuzma and Brian E. Roach.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another edition of the Steel City Underground podcast. My name is Joe Kuzma, and I'm, smiling ear to ear today because I am here with my best friend, A1 Mr. Brian E. Roach. Brian, what's going on?
I am I'm giddy with excitement, my friend. And should I tell you why?
No.
I don't know if you saw it on Facebook. I'm 2 pounds away from Vegas, baby.
Oh,
2 pounds.
Man. Hey.
2 pounds, and I go jump off that hotel. So I'm excited.
Hey, keep me in the loop, man, because you know what? I don't know. I'm not as crazy as you, but I might be crazy enough. And my progress is coming along here. I'm out of the boot. I'm out of the brace. I'm almost ready to start running around, man. And I'm not quite there yet, but I would like to be. But you know what? There's all kinds of crazy stuff going on. I mean, we've got some crazy plans coming on the beginning of next week, which we're really excited about. We're being real tight-lipped here, but be sure to check out the show then. But there's some NFL news. We're all wondering about a collective bargaining agreement, all the talks that are going on. For those who aren't aware, the contract signed between basically the Players Union and the National Football League, we're in the last year of that. And one thing I want to throw out there real quick, I owe this to Derek Overly. He's one of our contributors here at Steel City Underground. Derek's already been here a year. I can't even believe that. Time just flies.
Amazing.
Yeah,
That's amazing.
I know. Before you know it, and he has a young one too,
feels like 20.
A newborn. His newborn, yeah, you know what I mean? Geez, man, come on. I don't want to go into the grave yet. But Derek brought this to our attention, and you know what? I'm gonna speak with some of our friends here around the league and see if we can get clarification. But because unless they like rip it up and they extend this and they got like new stuff and it implements and everything. We're looking at everything from, you can't maybe restructure some of these contracts with the Steelers. Only up to, you can restructure. Let me rephrase. But the way the money is prorated over the life of the years of the contract that's already there, and whether or not they could add extra years, or how extensions and things of that work. There's a whole lot of like fine print because this is the final year of that collective bargaining agreement. So some of the things, that we throw out there, herky-jerky, willy-nilly, whatever you want to call it, and say, well, you could just restructure this guy and get a lot of money, even though we really haven't really gone into details, and I don't technically feel comfortable all the time talking about cap and salaries and things of that nature because I have a very cursory knowledge of that. So we're going to get some clarifications on that. But I know a lot of people are thinking you could just, I guess releasing players will still give you some cap relief in certain areas. We've already talked about some of the players, whether or not they'll be able to restructure and do things of that nature. There's not a whole lot of guys that they could really touch the contracts of, and the amount of money that they'll give you on the 2020 salary cap isn't a whole lot either. So I do feel confident that they will be able to get enough that would at least cover a franchise tag for Bud Dupree. You could go and play around with some of these things online. There's salary cap calculators and things of that nature and look at those numbers yourself. I think they could at least get to some point like that. But I wanted almost a little bit of a potpourri here. I wanted to bring up the thing with Bud Dupree real quick. I think we mentioned this on the last show, right? It was Labs that was talking about, he was played in a rotation, a linebacker rotation with 3 other guys, first, maybe even the second year before they decided we're not going to do the rotation anymore. Then he switches sides. He's been working with Chuck Smith, who's a pass rushing specialist during the offseason the last few years. So for a lot of people who think he's just a one and done, hey, just hold on because we're going to have some more numbers and figures for you right there. But I just wanted to address that. Some of that's coming in the comments. Some people are thinking, oh, well, you know what, maybe spend that money elsewhere or whatever else. And it's like, well, where else are you really going to spend it? I know there's already people pulling the trigger, other bloggers and stuff talking about TJ Watt already in his contract. Look, TJ is still in his rookie deal. 4th year. They're going to lock him up for a 5th year on a 5th year option under, the fifth-year option for a first-round draft pick. So we're still off into the horizon for that yet. Let's not quite get there yet. That might be 2 years away still before we have to talk about paying TJ Watt. So that has no bearing on whether or not you spend money on Bud Dupree, depending on how all this collective bargaining goes. Because if it goes in the toilet, there's even talk about an uncapped year, because that'll be the Wild West and everything. But then again, when teams went off into, they went rogue like the Dallas Cowboys and Washington Redskins did the last time that this happened, then they were penalized and pretty heavily. We're talking about $10 million and I think $36 million when you're talking about the Redskins when they went into the following season and they already they had an actual agreement on the table, signed, sealed, and delivered. So a lot of this is going to have a lot of bearing on what happens, going with all of this free agent talk and everything else. But there's also some other things that are part of this deal too. But just wanted to put that on the table right away, Brian.
Well, absolutely. And, look, there's a lot of stuff that's going on that is in flux. And that's just the way it is, and until things get locked down, until we have a new CBA, until we know exactly what everything's going to be, there's a lot in flux. And, we're going to find out. I'm looking for wood so I can knock on it so I don't have to. I'll just have to use my wooden head. Knock, knock. That they'll figure out a way to minimally get the franchise cap or the franchise tag number available for Bud. I just think it's really important to keep this group together and the bond that they're starting to create with each other, to keep all that flowing. Because I think the sky's the limit for this group if they can do that.
Yeah, and by all means too, it's not that I don't think that somebody like Ola or like a Tuzar Skipper can't eventually be a role player or maybe even ascend into, James Harrison, but it's going to take a little bit of time. I don't think they could just jump in and play right away. And at the same time, I don't think you're going to be able to afford any other free agent that's going to come in and play as well as Bud Dupree does, or draft anybody that's going to come in and not have the same type of learning curve too, playing in the pros. And by the way, I just had this up and I was looking at I had the tag number. The franchise tag number for Bud Dupree, I think, is 16.3 million is what I'm looking at. And then to add to this, since this is the final year of the CBA, teams are permitted to. Usually, you can only use one tag, right? And there's two different flavors of transition tags. What is it? There's like a restricted one and an unrestricted one. So you can actually use two tags this year. The Steelers and any other team in the NFL would be permitted to use a franchise tag and a transition tag. Obviously, the transition tag deals with different figures. We're talking about maybe $2 million or a little over $2 million less if Bud Dupree were to be transition tagged. And in years past, that we talked about this with Le'Veon Bell, the transition tag numbers weren't any different than franchise tag numbers. In this case, for a 3-4 outside linebacker, Bud Dupree's number, 16 million. 266,000, so 16.3 if you round up. That would go down to I think about 14 even by the source of overthecap.com as I'm doing this with the salary cap calculator. So didn't want to put too much false information out there, but sometimes, I've asked agents, players don't know this stuff, so you can't really ask the players. That's why they hire agents, unless you're Richard Sherman. But some of the agents too, there's a lot of legalese that goes into this, and that's why you got other people who work in the front office other than Kevin Colbert that are so-called salary cap experts and crunch all this, and lawyers and everything else of this nature. So just, be careful when you hear some things that are out there because, there's very few people who are experts. Even when you go on, like, I want to say I was looking at something even with NFL.com, and they use overthecap.com as a source for this information. And these guys literally wrote the book. I think it's the only book that you could read, very dry material about salary cap stuff. And you know what? My head's still spinning. I got birdies like floating around tweeting when I read this stuff because, it makes me dizzy. It makes my head spin.
I understand, and I don't want to read it either because look, it's dry enough reading programming language books. I'm not reading any kind of those books. But before we, since this is kind of a potpourri, I owe some shout outs because there were people unlike you who got my inconceivable reference last time around to The Princess Bride. So Nathaniel Pugh, you did pick it up, and hopefully you stay for more than just the Princess Bride references. Ryan Bowling went one above him and actually included his own Princess Bride quote, which I love, as did another individual. I feel the need for speed. One of my favorite lines. You keep using that word. I do not think it means what you think it means. And then there was one more. I can't remember. Riptide Gaming. And all I'm going to leave you with is this. My name is Inigo Montoya. You killed my father. Prepare to die.
And you know what? Sadly, and I'm
ashamed of you.
I know. I got to throw myself. It's not because I've never wanted to. It's one of those things where I got to get around to it. I'm so bad with some of this stuff. I do it with movies. Sometimes I do it with video games. It's really hard with like movies because there's so many that come out these days, and then to go back, you got to allot your time between whatever comes out now and going back to watching old or classic stuff. I mean, I'm obviously much younger than you, so I'm not sure when Princess Bride came out, but I have not seen it. And you know what? I'm pretty good, Brian, at getting to the bucket list here. So I've added it to it. I'm going to try and watch it within the next week. This came out in '87, so I was like 6 years old. Yes. And I know I know of one thing with it. I know Andre the Giant's in it, and being a big pro wrestling guy, it's always been kind of there in the back of my mind to watch this movie. So you know what? I'm gonna maybe I'll sit my daughter down and we'll end up watching it. We'll have a family night. We'll make some popcorn and I'll get around to it because you know what? I felt shame in not knowing. I know so much pop culture references like that. Me and you both worked in video stores back when it was Please Be Kind, Rewind with the VHS cassette tapes. Yep. So, we know a lot of movie trivia, but, you one-upped me on this one, and I feel dirty, and I got to go take a shower now.
Yes, I could throw some more at you, and maybe I will by the end of this episode because, I only ran video store chains for 9 years, so.
Yeah. Well, I think I had 6 or 7 years in it because, I started when I was in high school and went through, paid a lot of the college bills too, so. And that was fun. And then we moved to DVD, and I'm one of the first guys who had a DVD player, and that was really cool. It was like, hey, you could just skip the scenes. Wow. Just kind of like the same convenience of a compact disc when, people may not know, some of the listeners out there, you got all this stuff digital, even this show right here. Before, you may have had to tune in at like 2 o'clock in the afternoon to hear me or Brian. They probably would never let us on radio. But aside from that, although, we all have the face for radio thing going, but,
speak for yourself. I'm gorgeous.
Oh, yeah, such a silky smooth voice. But we do have some other important things to talk about, and that's more or less what's going to go on here with the CBA and the NFL schedule, both regular season and postseason. The owners are floating around a lot of ideas. The players are wondering about different things, and wow, these are some pretty radical changes, particularly, when it reflects even for the Pittsburgh Steelers. Let's, excuse me, I got a frog in my throat, a snake in my boot. Brian, you know that reference?
I do not.
Oh, buddy, this is payback time. Let me tell you. That's from Toy Story, man.
Well, I should know that, but I've watched it enough times, I guess, maybe once.
Oh, come on, man! I want to say
which one?
I want to say I don't think it matters. I think he's probably said it in all of them. I don't know. That's Woody, man. That's when they pulled the string on the cowboy doll. Okay, anyways.
It was because you didn't sound like Woody. If you sounded like Tom Hanks, I would have got it.
Well, I don't think he sounds like him either. Maybe he does. Maybe it's more like a southern, or western or whatever cowboy. There's a snake in my. I don't think it sounds like that either. But anyways, so changes with the CBA, and how does this apply to the Steelers? Well, or how it could have applied, or whatever. We were already talking about the whole free agency rigmarole. Great word, by the way.
There you go.
They want to add games, regular season, postseason, and you know what? I think we've talked about this before. It's been a while because obviously we don't talk about this during the regular season because why would we? We have other things to talk about. So we usually bring this up in the off season. We talk about, well, here's how they could tweak the Pro Bowl, and here's what they should do with the Hall of Fame game. Not play it, and well, actually that's true. That's probably true for both of them, to be honest. But I always thought like the Pro Bowl. I thought the Pro Bowl should move around, and this would give fans an opportunity to see these players. But I also understand these players, if they play this game in, let's say, Cleveland, Ohio, in February, these players are going to be like, screw that. It's cold. It's ugly. It's Cleveland. We don't want to go there. We understand, by the way. I don't want to go there either for a Pro Bowl. So it would fall flat on its face. I talked about putting it, with Canton with the Hall of Fame festivities, but then who's going to want to play that game or do any of that stuff ahead of the season and then lose somebody? It's the same reason why everybody sits out the preseason games with any of your multi-million-dollar contracted players, like a Ben Roethlisberger, for example. So I totally get it, and I think that's part of what they're thinking about this too. They want to add a game to the regular season. And we've talked about that before, going from 16 games to 17 games, or 17 weeks currently. They're floating an idea too of adding a second bye week in there, which then you would get 18 weeks of football, or 19 weeks of football, right? Because if they add a bye, in theory, you got to add an extra week for the bye, and then you would have the extra week for the extra game. So you'd have 2 more weeks of the NFL, and then an additional playoff team in each of the 2 conferences. So there would be now, instead of 6, you would have 7 teams that make it in the AFC and NFC. And I always thought that was kind of a cool idea. I understand there's some teams that, they're year to year maybe don't deserve it, and they should maybe not look into doing that. But I also thought it would be kind of cool if only the best team in each conference got a bye, and it would change a lot of history. It would change history for the Steelers in this way, which this one, it has to be brought up. It was Warren Sharp, at Sharp Football on Twitter, and I got to give him credit for this because it was in the back of my mind, but I didn't go the extra distance to really research and think about this. But when I first heard this news, it was 24 hours ago, maybe at the most, 36 hours ago when this started to leak out. And, it just so happened I was looking up the CBA stuff with Bud Dupree, and then all of a sudden I saw this almost as soon as it was posted. I was like, whoa, that's kind of cool. It was an idea I was thinking of. But the way I was thinking, it was like, okay, they add an extra team in each conference. And I'm like, man, the Steelers were like the one team. They were the odd man out in the whole tiebreaker thing this year. But they were last year too. And then I started thinking, I was like, well, and then there was that year we talk about where the Andy Reid and the Chiefs, they sat all their guys and they put, and they still almost beat the Chargers, and it went to OT, and there was botched calls, and the Steelers got screwed out of getting in, even though they were 8-8 and didn't deserve it. It so happens that I'm going to read this verbatim from Warren Sharp at Sharp Football. If the newly proposed playoff system were in place, the last 10 years, we would have added 5 10-win teams, 9 9-win teams. That's a good thing, right? I mean, it's close. But 5 10-win teams, those are teams I think that should be in. And then 6 8-win teams. And he says, goes on to say, the team helped the most, by far, would have been the Steelers, who would have made 4 more playoff trips. I was like, wait a minute, 4 more. That's only they've missed the playoffs how many times last decade? Only 4, right? 4. Oh, so it would have been perfect, 10 for 10, Mike Tomlin's teams. This is why he's the head coach. Everybody gets so upset. We talk about how entitled the fans are, and I'm thinking to myself here, holy crap. So for all the years he didn't make the playoffs, they were the next team in. They were right there on deck. They were knocking on the door and didn't get in. This is why Mike Tomlin is my head coach, Brian.
I understand. Look, and I'm all in favor of this change, and I'll tell you why. You don't get anything for being number 2.
Yeah.
And, so why should the number 2 team get a bye? The hell with them. Only the top team gets the bye. Everybody else has to play. I like that. That's why, in my mind, you try and get the number 1 seed. It will keep, in my mind, it would keep teams more competitive. Week 17 kind of stuff, where, you kind of have to play because it's you or the other team. It's not, oh, well, we're going to get either the one or the two, so we're going to get our bye. No, you have to be the top team. Look, this is all about money, obviously, right? It's, for people who don't know, the players right now get, I think, either 46 or 47% of the revenues of the league. And they want more. Of course they do. But the owners also don't really want to give them any more. So if they have to give them more, what they want is for that revenue pile to get bigger.
Yes.
And one of the ways that revenue pile gets bigger is you add playoff games, which anybody who's gone to or attempted to buy tickets to a playoff game knows cost more than regular games and sometimes considerably more. So, it's either you add games to the season, which they want to do, or you add games to the postseason, which they want to do. So they'd like to do both. Look, would I mind dropping a preseason game for a regular season game so that it was a 17-game season? No. But at the same time, let's be realistic and understand that really what you're adding is one more game early in the season where they're still all going to be stinky. Because they're not prepared. Do I like the idea of an extra playoff game? Absolutely, I like that idea. And it's not just because it would have benefited the Steelers those 4 years. I like it because I think, as I said, you get rewarded for being at the top. When you're number two, you're poo. You're number two. You're not supposed to get anything. You're just poo.
Well, there's a few more layers to this too. Number one, I was talking about Mike Tomlin would have been 10 for 10 for everyone who complains. I mean, he's the only guy that would have happened aside from it's Bill Belichick. Hello, you know what I mean? Yep. So the other layer to this is there's only the one other season, and Mike Tomlin didn't make the playoffs. That was in 2009, and they went 9-7, and they would have been just behind. I have here just behind the Houston Texans with win percentage in common games. A lot of people were thinking, 9-7. Well, there were a few 9-7 teams. You had the Jets and the Ravens that year, and the Bengals won the division. So you had already had two teams in the AFC North. So you had four teams sitting at 9-7 with various tiebreakers. The Jets got it by common games, and the Ravens got in on conference win percentage. So the Steelers were just edged out, despite having a winning record at 9-7, and along with the Houston Texans apparently had them edged as well. So, you're talking very close there. There would have only been 1 year. If this was a rule already, obviously, if this was already in place from the time, when did this go in? 2011, 2012, the current one. So, obviously we're talking about from the previous CBA, but if this was always a thing, Mike Tomlin is almost immaculate record there when it comes to making a postseason. It would have been almost unheard of if there wasn't a guy named Billy Belichick. So anyway, the other part of this is the money, the piece of the pie. It's not just tickets. I mean, for me, you get rid of a
revenue.
Yes, it's TV revenue. It's TV revenue. You're going to add maybe 2 weeks because you're going to have an extra week with the bye, and you're going to have an extra week for the games. So you got to add 2 more weeks to the schedule. And I'm just wondering, where do they push everything? Do they push the Super Bowl back? Do they get rid of the Pro Bowl week? You're still going to have maybe the 2 week layover, right? Between the conference championships and the Super Bowl. They're not going to rush everyone right into the Super Bowl. They want everybody to be healthy, and they want it to be a good competitive game with lots of media build leading up into that week. So I don't think they change anything with that. But what they're going to change is that wild card weekend now. Instead of there being 4 games, 2 in each conference, there's going to be 3 in each conference for a total of 6. So you get more TV revenue there too, because guess what? Every network's going to want a playoff game. Fox is going to want it. NBC's going to want it. ESPN's going to want it. You may even throw it on regular broadcast television via ESPN to ABC. That's all owned by, the Mickey Mouse company, Disney. So, you got all that. CBS, I'm leaving out of this. And who knows what other deals end up getting done here. Let's also remember the DirecTV Sunday ticket contract is going to be up soon, too. So they're thinking about this in terms of maybe even digital rights, streaming. You got Verizon that has like their NFL platform. There are just so many different, revenue generators here. I understand the players are going to be like, well, this is an extra game, but it's an extra game. We get it. It's more wear and tear on your bodies and everything. I understand the purists that are out there too that are thinking from a standpoint of okay, you have these records, you have certain stats and records, and everything. Okay, but at this point, you have sports science where guys are playing longer. You already have guys who are playing more games already that are breaking some of the old time records that stood the test of time. That doesn't really take away from the guys who held those records. Things change. The game gets faster. People improve. Get better, healthier. Tom Brady's going to play until he's 70. Things of that nature. So, I'm not too bothered by that, to be completely honest, if they're going to add it to the regular season. I just want to know, am I going to be sitting in warm weather or am I going to be sitting in cold weather? And as a ticket buying fan, if you're already paying for a season ticket package, you're already getting socked for those preseason games you don't want to go to, and you end up you can't even give the tickets away. We did a giveaway the one year, and it was like I went to the third winner on the thing before. It was like, forget it. And I think I just, actually somebody did end up getting it, but it was like, because I had to, because legally due to the sweepstakes. But I remember I was like, the next year I was like, forget it. It's not even worth giving the tickets away. I'll do whatever if like one of you guys want to go or one of my friends or family. So, and the Steelers changed that a few years ago. They went from like, everything was like $100, I think, for a ticket for where I was sitting anyways. And, it changes based on, are you, in the front row, 50-yard line, it's a more expensive ticket. Are you in the club? It's a more expensive ticket. You in the corner end zone or the upper decks, etc. So, just generically speaking, let's just say it was $1,000 for 10 games. Okay, let's just say it's the same thing now. I'd much rather that one ticket be a regular season game than, last year was week 1 and week 2 were the home games. You didn't even get to see the dress rehearsal at home in Heinz Field. So, and I still get excited. I like watching the preseason. I think the coaches and stuff they don't want the games. They don't want the preseason games. They want the practice, though. They want the time to be able to develop players, evaluate, see who's going to make the team. There's a lot of layers to that, too, because I think they need to expand the rosters. But if they do that, then there's more players to pay. So it all depends on how big a chunk of this pie are you going to take out of the owners or whatnot. But, I'm okay with that from a ticket buying standpoint. The other part of that is too, and this is a catch-22, because if you don't want to be spending the money on an extra home game, you're going to assume, I'm starting to assume, and this is what we originally pitched, is that extra game that they're going to add, that's not going to take away from teams having a home game. So the Steelers they went to London, they played the Vikings. That was technically the Vikings' home game. So the Steelers still had 8 at home, but that year it was 7 at home for the Vikings. They didn't have 8 home games. The one in the UK, the one in London, was technically, quote, quote, their home game. Now everybody gets 8 and 8 in that 9th game. Hey, you could play it at a neutral site. It doesn't have to be Mexico. It doesn't have to be Canada. It doesn't have to be the UK, which they're contracted to have at least 4 games there. But I think out of the 17 extra games that you would have would be, hey, every week they could play somewhere neat. It would almost be like college, where they play like these big, early season games, and they're playing in a pro stadium instead of, Ohio State plays somewhere. They play somebody, or LSU, or somebody plays a Cowboys stadium or something like that. You know what I mean? They could play in some of these other areas that are football deprived. They could go back to places that used to have pro teams like St. Louis. They can go to new areas that they might want to be interested in, or even where they have the Pro Bowl, like Orlando or Honolulu or something like that. That gives people a destination, and also displaced fans that are living in those areas or want to take a vacation. Here you go. And I think that could work out well too.
Yeah, look, I think there's a lot of potential opportunity for them. The biggest thing is, that they need to be able to force the networks to pay more for those television rights, right? They don't want to backslide on the number that they get out of their television rights. That's a big, huge, giant chunk of their revenue. And so they need that to continue to grow. So adding a game that is a premier game, like an additional playoff game, that's a pretty big deal. Getting the networks all to come up with bids for that kind of thing. And then, as you mentioned, the Sunday ticket, which we all hope and pray DirecTV loses, and it goes to someplace else, so that we do not have to have crappy DirecTV in order to get Sunday ticket. Yes, I disparaged them, but I'm mad at them, so the hell with it.
That's okay. You know what? I don't think the money will be a problem because overall TV viewership is shifted to time shifting, like DVR. It's shifted to like Netflix and on demand, and people aren't watching ads like the way they used to. So you see even something that's lost, most traditional TV has lost not only cable subscribers, but they've lost TV viewers in hordes and droves. So then you see somebody like WWE get a $2 billion 10-year contract, and their ratings are like a fifth of what they used to be in their heyday in the 90s even. They're pulling much smaller numbers, but because their numbers have eroded much slower than other programming, they were able to draw that number. That's WWE. We're talking about the NFL. The NFL viewership, no matter what myth or whatever's out there, fake news trying to say that they've lost viewers. Let's say the Kaepernick stuff, for example. I don't think they've lost anything. And you know what? They're the first ones to come out and self-promote and say this Sunday Night Football game did this in this market or overall nationwide, one of the most watched games, and that's usually a lot of times tied to the fan bases that are on there too. Steelers, Cowboys, Packers, et cetera, et cetera. So when you're looking at it from that standpoint, if the networks are going to take this on, and I don't think their contracts, they may not be up just yet. So they got to be in agreement here. And then most certainly if they already have a current deal on the books, are they going to say no to an extra week or two of NFL football and an extra playoff game on their networks when they could sell that to anybody that's buying ads? Hell no, they're not going to say no to that. So when it comes back around to, hey, you know what, this contract's up, you're going to have to pony up a little bit more money. They've already they're going to make some, I believe, off the existing deal. It's not, I don't think they get to rip the NFL and let's say ESPN don't get to rip that up, but the NFL will definitely have leverage there by all means, and they'll have suitors. They'll have many, many, many suitors. I mean, it doesn't even matter. I almost said the CW, but that's not gonna,
you never know.
You never know. But I mean, come on. I mean, I don't think so. Nothing like that. But I could see, NBC's only locked into the Sunday Night Football, or Disney saying, okay, we would like to have a regular season games on ABC for a change. So most certainly that could happen. They're going to put a bunch of these things on NFL Network and be exclusive and charge the telcos and the cable companies and dish companies and everything more money to have that NFL Network as part of the package. And I think that's what's coming, Brian. I would hope the Game Pass ends up being live. It was very cool that the games were up almost immediately now, but if you've been looking at what goes on outside of the United States, and I believe Canada too might be restricted as well, the international NFL Game Pass, you travel overseas, those people are watching the games like live, and the service is so much phenomenally better because it's Game Pass with like basically Sunday Ticket, but Sunday Ticket is only Sunday, and it doesn't include Sunday night, doesn't include Monday night, doesn't include Thursdays. It's just so ridiculous. And then it works like crap, and you're 2 or 3 plays behind if you're streaming a cord cutter like I am. So I like where all this is going. The biggest question is now, how do the players get paid? I think they're trying to iron that out now too. Like, do you add like a 1/17th of whatever their contract is to, let's say somebody's getting paid $16 million, right? So now you got to take 1/17th of that and increase it to whatever that ends up being, which in this case I think would be a full $1 million. I'm just going to say they're making $1 million a game. So yeah, they should make $1 million for the extra game. I don't think any player is going to be upset with that. They might be all over the wear and tear or whatever, but the lifespan of your career span in the NFL is like 3 years on average. So if some of these guys get an extra game to prove themselves or pocket a little bit more money, I think they might be for it. I don't know. I think the biggest one here though is if they add a second bye, regardless if they add an extra game, an extra bye week would give you an extra week of football, give you a lot of this same leverage, and it might help teams be healthier and more competitive, more parity that the NFL is always seeking.
Yeah, you talk about the extra adding a 17th game and how that would translate into salary. Just so everybody remembers, that doesn't necessarily translate into an extra playoff game because they don't get, that's extra. They get paid for it, but it's a much lower rate. The players get a much lower number for playing in those extra games. They do get something though. But if you're adding a 17th game to the season, now you have to take into account the contract situations for that, which means you got salary cap issues, you got other things. All of those things kind of roll into how are the players getting their portion of the revenue, right? So if let's say that the NFL was agreed to go to a 50-50 split, that bumps it up 3 or 4% from what it was.
Yeah, it's pretty close. Yeah, it's close now. Yeah,
you're talking. That's still a huge amount of money to be split amongst out of however that is going to get translated out. And if part of that is in order to do that, that means the salary cap goes up by X dollars because teams are now going to have to compensate for this. I think it does make sense. They at one point they presented the idea of an 8-team game schedule. And with an 18-game schedule, you're absolutely right. Then you absolutely can't get away without having a second bye. Now, a 17-game schedule, you might be able to really manage a way to do it without a second bye for everybody. But definitely not in an 18. If you go as high as 18, you're going to have to give extra time off and give teams a chance to rest and recover, as well as you said, probably increase the rosters because you can't, look, there are barely enough guys to play as it is,
yeah.
Starting caliber guys. So you ask them to put themselves through an extra 2 games of full contact, full speed football. You have to anticipate injuries are going to increase, and you're going to need more guys on your roster. Whether that means you bump it up to 55 from a 53, or whatever it may be, you're going to have to allow more spots for guys to give teams a little bit more security in what they're doing. There's so many aspects that go into all of it. But it will. Go ahead.
No, I was going to say even more active players on game day would make sense to me too.
Absolutely.
It doesn't make sense to me why there has to be inactives also. Like, it's just kind of, I think it's dumb. I'm not going to lie. I think everybody on your roster, everybody that's on your active roster should be available to play. I think that's kind of nonsense in a way, especially with the way there's injuries. You look at some of these teams, the Eagles didn't have anybody that could even play wide receiver the one game, or you lose like a lineman or two, and then all of a sudden you don't have any linemen either. I think it's asinine to me. I don't understand it.
I'm with you 100%. I think I get some of the parity issues that they try to control to limit every team to X number of guys and then have some in reserve because that's, you've got some space for guys who can't really play, right? But that's what it all boils down to. It's your active roster's got to have more spots. Your full roster has to have more spots just to keep everything on an even keel. And that just plays into a whole bunch of things that go along with this, and then we don't want to talk about these guys because they stink. They refs stink. But now you got the refs. They're gonna have to. They have more games at this point. So you got to deal with that money, even though that may not be that much. To me, they should just damn well do it. They already make more than enough for part-time job people.
Well, you bring up a very great point there, and I was going to add this to everything else you were just saying. Is if you're looking at this objectively the way we are, not only adding games, you're adding weeks. It's making the NFL season a little longer. Maybe training camp starts earlier, I don't know, or it trails off a little later, and maybe they put the squeeze on the XFL to not be playing a game when the NFL draft's going on. Were you going to watch the draft or are you going to watch the XFL championship? Although that would probably be on a Saturday, and we're talking about, round 6 picks. They don't even have like video clips of some of these guys. They don't even announce them on the TV. You're lucky if you see it on the ticker sometimes. But regardless, you know what I mean? It's like a head-to-head thing too. And by the way, just a side note, did you see they sent the football from the first XFL game to the Pro Football Hall of Fame? I think it's really cool. There was a lot of speculation. People are like, oh, this city Pittsburgh should get an XFL team. Canton should get it. And I was like, well, isn't Canton like the Pro Football Hall of Fame stuff pretty much like solely control. It seems like the NFL has a firm grasp or an iron grip on how all that, but it's still an independent entity. It's a Pro Football Hall of Fame. So, you know, that's pretty cool. They have like AFL stuff in there, not too much Canadian League stuff, but they do that's cool. They got the XFL football. But anyways, I was thinking about that. That's the whole reason the XFL comes into fruition, is because you got this dead period, whereas we're talking right now where nothing's going on. And and that kind of stretches the season out a little bit. You know, you're never going to get year round with the NFL. You can't. Football's too violent of a sport, too brutal. It just can never happen. But that's kind of what I was thinking too, was, okay, if it's a little bit longer now, and now you got the referees tied up a couple of more weeks, now you can actually hire full-time people, and now you don't have to worry about them. The only thing they would have to worry about is job security themselves. Screw up, and then you're out, and then what? I gave up like a good, I don't know, a teaching job or something, because I wanted to be an NFL referee, and I only lasted a year and a half, and now I'm scratching my rear end because I'm unemployed and can't. These jobs are hard to come by or something. You know what I mean? And that's just going to be life. That's the way it's going to be for some folks. And it's going to help others that don't go into the referee profession right now because they can't get the time off from work. They can't get away, family, this, that, and other things to be able to support that, support your household, support yourself. You have to have a certain walk of life or a certain background in order to do it. And some of these guys, what was that? Hockley, a lawyer? I know some guys are like lawyers. Or they work like jobs like of that nature where maybe they could take off the time or they could afford to be able to be an NFL referee too. But that disqualifies so many other persons that may be qualified and help bring up that profession, and then we might complain less about them.
Yeah, look, I would be thrilled if I didn't have to complain about how stinky and crappy the refs are. Trust me, there's clouds that annoy me. There are other things. Blades of grass tend to aggravate me. I'll find other things to complain about. If I can get rid of the refs, I'll be quite happy. To paraphrase a different quote from a different movie, I have come here to chew bubblegum and complain. And I'm all out of bubblegum. So... And you should damn well know that one.
I'm drawing a blank. It's going to be movie trivia night on the Steel City Underground podcast.
Oh, man. Come on, guys out there, listeners. You guys got to know that one. And if you get, it's not just make Joe feel bad by not just telling him what movie it's from, but who said it.
Very, very, very well, then. It's going to be just me and you throwing out random quotes and not knowing where any of them come from. So I'm cool. I'm cool with that. But yeah, you know what else too? I was looking at this. This is how it affects too. Tiebreakers. So we were already talking about this a little bit with the 2009 team. Now you might not have 4 teams that finished 9-7. Which, coincidentally, this happened again in 2017, which was going to be my model year for pointing all of this stuff out. You want to know why 2017, Brian?
Yes, I do, even though I already know. I want to know why.
Do you know? It's the year that Jesse caught it. And
yes,
the Steelers, this would have forced the Patriots to play an extra game. They go nowhere whenever they have to do that. The Steelers wouldn't have faced the Jaguars. Actually, they would have faced the Baltimore Ravens, who they had actually swept that year. There were 4 teams that were 9-7. So it was the Titans, the Bills, and the Ravens. So they would have played, well, you know what? I can't say that for sure because, well, the Steelers wouldn't have had a bye. That's right. Because they still would have ended up second. So in the scenario that I'm talking about, as things actually happened and not as they should have, Jesse caught it, the Steelers were the number 2. They wouldn't have had a bye. They would have had to play the Ravens. And instead of, them having the bye and waiting for Jacksonville to win, and Jacksonville being that next seed that they would end up facing, they would face in the higher seed instead of the lower seed. So it would be immensely interesting to me. What happens there? Tell me that's not a television ratings game too, because a lot of people want to play the game of, well, just a bunch of stinky teams would end up getting in, which we already mentioned. There's 10 win teams and 9 win teams that would end up making it. Ravens versus Steelers in Pittsburgh, the third game of the year. or a third time in the season to see if they could sweep them again. And it's just, and I'm not going to say it's going to change any differently, because when you're playing somebody that's familiar of a foe, they could have easily had the Steelers number just like the Jaguars did, especially when they lost Ryan Shazier. But I think just based on, hey, the Steelers beat them twice already, and you're playing in Pittsburgh, hey, you know what? That gives them the edge. And then who knows? Everything changes. That was the last year with the whole complement of killer bees, and this was a 13-win football team. Should have been a 14-win football team. Just, I mean, it opens up a lot of possibilities. So for a lot of the naysayers that are out there, or traditionalists or whatever, the only thing that I'm going to get too traditional on is I don't want them to add expansion teams to the NFL. Not for a very long time, because the way everything's aligned right now, I really like the 4-4 divisions. So you got 4 in each conference, 8 divisions, each with 4 teams. I really like that versus the old style. You had the AFC Central. And it just seems to me like the North, it just feels like more of a division. You play everybody, twice a year. It feels better than having like the Houston Oilers in there and the Jacksonville Jaguars in there too. And you had 6 teams in a division when the Browns came back after, the original ones moved to Baltimore. So, I'm not looking for expansion or adding more teams, because then what you're doing is that means you need more capable coaches, more capable quarterbacks, and everything. That way, everything gets a little more watered down. I think this still is, everything would be competitive, and then with adding that game, who knows what happens. Instead of having 4 9-7 teams, maybe you have 2 9-8 teams, and then 2 10-win teams out of those 4, and that ends up, maybe breaking some ties too, because somebody plays a conference game or whatever, and that gives them the better. Instead of all these other, you go like 5 criteria out to figure out who has the edge by strength of victory. You know what I mean? I like that. I like that a lot better in that scenario. So I don't get that. I'm not too much of a traditionalist either way with however they end up adding these games. I think though, I don't know, which would you prefer? Would you prefer regular season they add a game, or playoffs they add a game?
I'll be honest and tell you that my initial reaction is add the extra playoff game. I like that better. But the downside of that is I also want the extra season. Look, I'm one of those guys. As long as it's the NFL, I ain't arguing about more football. I want more football. I'm not. I want more quality football. Let me put it that way.
Yes.
I'm not yet a fan of. I like a lot of the things they're doing in the XFL, but they have not convinced me I need to watch it yet. I've tried, and I don't.
Yeah, so I think, do we have anything else to beat here? We're starting to get to beat the dead horse on, whether or not you add a game here or there or bye weeks and everything else. I kind of like the way that stands. We obviously love the idea if it helps the Steelers and benefits them, sure, as we are showing. But just to let everybody know, the NFL's official statement on all of this is out there. The release has been made, and so we're going to put the rubber stamp on the show with, I'm going to read this statement. It says, following more than 10 months of intensive and thorough negotiations. Man, they had some creative writer on this, not just a lawyer. This is good. The NFL players and clubs have jointly developed a comprehensive set of new and revised terms that will transform the future of the game, provide for players past, present, and future. I have a feeling that has to deal with retirement benefits, health insurance, things of that nature, which, if you're tenured, isn't it 3 years or is it 4 years? And then you're automatically in that healthcare pool plan or whatever, I think, Brian. Isn't that right?
I can't remember exactly. I thought it was 4.
I think it's 4.
Maybe it's 3.
I think it's 4, but they may be providing for more players, or maybe they'll be working on some other things with pensions and 401ks or whatever. I know a lot of these guys they're considered independent contractors as it is right now for the most part, I think. So it's tough to say that, because then they're also employees under other guys or whatever. I'm not getting into it in this one, but for most people who don't know too, before I finish this statement, when we were saying the 1/17th thing, I didn't finish my thought on that. Most people aren't aware that these guys get paid per game, regular season. That's when their checks are cut. So they get a check every time there's a regular season game. Okay, so if you signed like I said as my example, $16 million contract, you're getting $1 million check, $16 million checks. of $1 million apiece, 16 in number.
Yep.
So you're not getting just one lump sum check of 16 million. Another thing too that they are going to add to this, and I almost forgot. It's good that I was reading this statement. Did you know that the teams that are on the bye week, they don't get paid that week? Like the teams that, when you play in the playoff games, and this is an XFL thing that's put out there, but most people aren't aware. So again, somebody that's a $16 million player making $1 million a week. Let's say it's a quarterback. Let's say it's Ben. We'll just throw that out there as per example. He doesn't make $1 million for the playoffs. It's like $60,000 if they win, $30,000 if they lose, something like that. And it goes up each tier depending on what level of the postseason you're in, whether it's wild card, divisional, conference game, Super Bowl. Okay, so, some of the guys that aren't making as much money, that's a very big deal for them. Well, it's also a very big deal for those same guys when they're sitting out a week. They've earned a bye week by being the best team, or as it stands now, second best team in the league, and they're not getting any money, and it's been a very big gripe. So I think those guys do deserve it. If you get the bye, they deserve to get paid for that week off. You know what I mean? So that's going to be pretty cool. But anyways, they're going to ensure that the NFL's second century is even better and more exciting for the fans. Yay, that's me and you. The membership voted.
Yes.
The membership voted today. So this is on Thursday. They voted to accept the negotiated terms on the principal elements of a new collective bargaining agreement. The Players Association would also need to vote to approve the same terms for there to be a new agreement. Since the clubs and players need to have a system in place and know the rules that they will operate under by next week, the membership also approved moving forward under the final year of the 2011 CBA if the players decide not to approve the negotiated terms. Out of respect for the process and our partners at the NFLPA, that's the Players Association, we will have no further comment at this time. I mean, okay, they don't want to hit the hornet's nest here by saying anything else to it, but it seems like it's in the players' lap, and then all the things with restructuring and everything like that we were talking about, extra games, this and that. We're going to find out shortly if this is going to be a thing, or if they're going to still operate under the old thing, or if there's going to be any type of line item vetoes or whatever back and forth, and they got a week, I guess, to hammer this out before they operate under the existing rules for the final year, and then have to come back to this later on and moving forward.
Yeah. Look, my head starts to spin with all this CBA stuff, and I get it. Look, it's nice to know that the owners are happy with what they've presented. We'll see if the players are happy with what they presented.
Yes.
I will tell you this. I will be thrilled if we simply end up at a point where everybody is content with the changes, or they find a way to quickly resolve this so that after we move ahead into 2020, we are not sitting there going, will there be a 2021 season? I just want to not have to worry about
strike season. Strikes have never been good for any sports leagues. Just ask the NFL from many, many ages ago. But ask Major League Baseball, ask the NHL, ask them all. Has never been good for those leagues. And I don't know if the players necessarily end up getting what they really want. And I know it ends up harming quite a few of them that are in limbo too. So we shall see what happens. And maybe they'll come out and say that the salary cap's been raised by $50 million, and then the Steelers could sign all kind of people. They could bring back Jayvon Hargrave. By the way, what was the award? Was it the Black Pro Football? Now I got to look it up. I tweeted it out, and I can't remember.
Black College Pro Football Player of the Year, I think.
Yes, Jayvon Hargrave will receive the Black College Football Pro Player of the Year award, and presented by the NFLPA at the Black College Football Hall of Fame induction ceremony this weekend. So congratulations to Jay Wobble, and I'm glad I didn't forget that, because I wanted to mention it on the show, and he just happened to come up because I'm like, if they have $50 million, they could bring him back. So that would be great. Brian, thanks for joining me, my friend.
Always a pleasure.
Yeah,
always a pleasure.
Hey, we may have some bonus football, so we'll find out. Bonus football is always good, Maybe we could go like tailgating somewhere odd, or like Aruba or something they'll end up playing in.
Hey, are there actually stadiums in Aruba?
You know what? I have no idea. If they have, the XFL's playing in all these soccer stadiums, the NFL is always going to want to play to the largest audience possible.
Yes.
Heinz Field is it's small by nature of when you compare to some other stadiums. Well, like I don't want to say the Eagles and the Redskins are like 70-some thousand. Obviously, Jerry's World, the Cowboys Stadium, even the Browns Stadium's larger. So that's the reason the Steelers added all those seats. What did they hold? I think the maximum or largest crowd in Heinz Field has been like about 64,000 tops all time. I don't know. I got to look this up now. This is going to bother me. It holds 60. They claim they hold. No, it doesn't. Okay, so it used to hold 64. It went up to 65 in 2006, 65.5 in 2011. It's now 68,400. So pretty cool
Very
stuff.
nice.
Yeah, I'm wondering. And they have that the Garth Brooks concert was the record attendance, but you can put people on the field, on the grass for that and in the stands. So that's why that's a little more. You can't sit people on the field as much as they might want to. We can't go and sit on the field during an NFL game. They may frown upon that.
Usually that's correct, yes.
So, all right, folks, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. My name's Joe. His name's Brian. Until next time, we encourage everyone out there to be safe, be good. We'll catch you later.
We would like to thank you for listening and remind our listeners to follow us on social media and our website, www.steelcityunderground.com.